April 16, 1945, the Oder River, east of Baer. Before dawn, the horizon is alive with fire. Thover, Mort 1st, the bombardment lasts for hours. The ground trembles like an earthquake. In the forests near Silo Heights, soldiers of G. Hun Hittel, Volkster, and Old across the lines, Soviet infantry begin to move forward under cover of smoke. The massive roar of Kaak. Inside one of the bunkers near Silo, a young German radio operator whispers to himself, "When das die Heil ist, dann sind wir schon da." If this is hell, then we're already in it. As dawn rises, the Soviet advance slams into the German positions. The Silo Heights, a low ridge of ground about 50 kilometers east of Berlin, becomes a killing field. Zhukov's forces are slowed by the mud, minefields, and the desperate defense of Buss's troops. Soviet tanks burst into flames as German 88mm guns find their range. For a moment, it seems the line might hold, but then the second wave comes. Thousands of Red Army soldiers surge forward again, stepping over the bodies of the first. The defenders are forced back, village by village, bunker by bunker. Soviet loudspeakers blare across the lines. "Berlin will fall!" "Lay down your arms." Few listen. By nightfall on April 17th, the Soviets have taken much of the low ground, but Silo itself still holds. Zhukov, frustrated by the slow progress, orders his artillery to fire again through the night. Flames light the sky like a false dawn. April 19th. After 3 days of continuous fighting, the 9th Army begins to disintegrate. Communications are collapsing. Entire battalions vanish in the chaos. Buss's reports to OKH, the German Army High Command, go unanswered. Hitler, in his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, refuses to believe it. He still insists that the Oder line can hold. By the evening of April 20th, Hitler's 56th birthday, the first Soviet shells begin landing inside Berlin. The city that once symbolized the power of the Reich now trembles under its own funeral bells. Inside Berlin, air raid sirens wail again. Civilians drag mattresses into basements already packed with rubble and dust. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels walks through the Chancellery corridors, promising that the Führer will lead Germany to victory. But outside, the Volkssturm battalions, men too old or too young to be soldiers, are issued Panzerfausts and rifles from World War I. A 13-year-old boy writes in his diary, "They say the Russians are at the river. Mother says we will fight. I don't know what we fight for anymore." In the Tiergarten, soldiers dig trenches among the statues. Berlin's defenses are being prepared for a street-by-street battle. The 56th Panzer Corps under General Helmuth Weidling takes command of the city's defense. He knows what's coming, the end. Outside the city, Soviet tanks of the 8th Guards Army begin their encirclement. Konev's 1st Ukrainian front swings up from the south, closing the last escape routes. The noose tightens hour by hour. Berlin has become the last fortress of a dying empire. And those inside will fight, because there is nowhere left to go. April 21st, 1945, East Berlin. The first Soviet shells scream over the rooftops at dawn. They strike near Frankfurter Allee, shattering glass and flinging debris across the street. Smoke rises from entire blocks. For the people of Berlin, it is no longer a distant war, it is here. Civilians pour into underground stations that have been turned into makeshift shelters. The tunnels echo with crying children, coughing, and the faint rumble of explosions above. Posters still hang on the walls. Der Sieg wird unser sein. Victory will be ours, but no one believes it anymore. On the front lines east of the Spree River, Soviet troops advance behind tanks and artillery. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, commanding from his forward headquarters near Munchberg, watches the advance through binoculars. He knows Stalin is impatient. Konev's 1st Ukrainian front is approaching Berlin from the south and could reach the city first. For Zhukov, this is not just a military objective. It is a race for glory. He orders constant pressure. The 5th Shock Army, 8th Guards Army, and 1st Guards Tank Army push into the city's eastern suburbs, Marzen, Lichtenberg, Friedrichshain. Each district becomes a battlefield of rubble and flame. Soviet sappers move through the streets cautiously, clearing mines, while tanks fire point-blank into buildings. German 88mm flak guns, repurposed for anti-tank defense, hide among the ruins and fire until they are overrun. The smell of smoke, cordite, and burnt masonry fills the air. Inside the forebunker, beneath the Reich Chancellery, Hitler listens to the distant thunder of artillery. His generals still bring situation maps each morning, but the maps no longer make sense. Every day, red markers representing Soviet units push closer to the city center. Steiner's counterattack will save us. Hitler insists. He refers to S. General Felix Steiner's army detachment, which supposedly holds positions north of the city. But Steiner's forces exist mostly on paper, broken units with no tanks, no fuel, and no communications. The order is impossible. When General Alfred Jodl finally admits that Steiner cannot attack, Hitler erupts in fury. Witnesses describe him trembling, shouting, his voice breaking, "The war is lost." For the first time, even his inner circle understands. The Reich is finished. Across the river Spree, the Soviet advance is methodical but costly. Soviet infantry clear each street room by room, tossing grenades through doorways before entering. The Germans use cellars and tunnels to move between buildings, appearing behind the attackers unexpectedly. It is a city transformed into a fortress, one where every intersection is a potential ambush. A Soviet platoon leader named Sergeant Nikolai Volkov recalls, "We stopped thinking about the map. There was only the next wall, the next corner. The enemy could be 10 meters away or right above us. Tank crews, unable to maneuver, fired directly into basements where German machine guns hide. In return, Volkssturm men with Panzerfausts lie in wait behind every wrecked tram and barricade. Each exchange costs lives." At Alexanderplatz, a T-34 catches fire, its turret blown apart. Nearby, a group of German teenagers, barely 16, hold their position until Soviet infantry swarm the intersection. None survive. By April 23rd, Berlin's radio network has collapsed. Propaganda broadcasts still play recorded speeches of Goebbels and martial music, but the transmitters are dying. Telephone lines are cut. The streets are filled with bodies, soldiers, civilians, horses, all half buried in dust. The smell of death lingers even underground. Goebbels orders the population to resist with every weapon, every stone. Posters go up declaring, "Besser Todos Rot," better dead than red, but many Berliners now simply want it to end. In the city's southern districts, Koneff's armor begins entering from the Tempelhof direction. Soviet artillery batters the Flakturm towers, enormous anti-aircraft fortresses, but they hold for now, bristling with guns. German gunners on the Zoo Flak Tower can see Soviet columns in the distance, their shells streaking into the horizon. By nightfall, Berlin is burning in every direction. From the air, reconnaissance planes see the city as a glowing wound, red, black, and gray. Tanks move like shadows through the inferno. Civilians wander between craters searching for food or water. Somewhere below, Hitler sits in his bunker, planning counterattacks that no longer exist. For the Red Army, the mission is simple but brutal. Take Berlin, street by street, house by house, until the Reichstag falls. For those still defending the city, it is no longer about victory. It is about survival, or vengeance, or simply refusing to die before the end. The Battle of Berlin has begun in earnest. April 24, 1945, the news tightens. By dawn, the last open roads west of Berlin are under Soviet fire. Columns of refugees, women, children, wounded soldiers struggle through the chaos on foot or in wagons. Many never make it. Soviet artillery and aircraft sweep the highways, turning the routes of escape into graveyards of shattered carts and burnt trucks. South of the city, Marshal Ivan Konev's 1st Ukrainian Front pushes through Zossen, destroying remnants of General Theodor Buss's 9th Army. To the north, Rokossovsky's 2nd Belarusian Front captures Stettin, sealing off any retreat toward the Baltic. Berlin is now surrounded. The German High Command, what remains of it, still refuses to acknowledge total encirclement. Orders are issued to hold at all costs. In reality, there are no costs left to count. Fuel is gone, ammunition dwindles, and the soldiers are exhausted beyond comprehension. Inside Berlin, General Helmuth Weidling, commanding the city's defense, surveys the chaos from his underground headquarters near the Hohenzollern-Damm. He commands a patchwork of units. The LVI Panzer Corps, once an armored formation, now mostly infantry. The 9th Parachute Division, but there are no aircraft left to deliver them. The Munich and Potsdam Volkssturm battalions, men over 60, boys under 16, and fragments of elite units. S. Nordland, Panzer Division Munchberg, and Marine battalions drawn from the Kriegsmarine. Weidling knows the city cannot hold for long. Still, he issues his orders. Each district must be defended to the last man. Every bridge is to be mined. Every street turned into a fortress. On the Soviet side, Zhukov and Konev finally link their fronts near Teltow Canal and Potsdam. Soviet troops shake hands amid the rubble. The trap has closed. The Red Army now controls everything up to the outskirts of the Tiergarten. Just 5 kilometers from the Reich Chancellery, Zhukov's command post moves forward to Karlshorst. His maps are spread over a table marked with flags and pins, red for each advance, black for heavy resistance. His intelligence officers report that Hitler is still in Berlin. Stalin's order is clear. Take the city. Capture the Führer. Zhukov's plan. 8th Guards Army under General Chukov to drive from the southeast toward Alexanderplatz. 1st Guards Tank Army to push through Treptow Park and along the Lampewehr Canal. 3rd Shock Army to move on the Reichstag itself. The attack will continue day and night. No pause, no retreat. Konev, meanwhile, swings westward toward the Elbe River, cutting off what's left of German resistance in central Germany. His armor, the 3rd Guards Tank Army, smashes through any survivors of Buss' 9th Army. The German columns trying to break into Berlin are destroyed in open fields. The encirclement is total. Inside the capital, chaos reigns. Civilians wander in shock, clutching bundles of clothes, searching for missing relatives. The water mains have burst. Electricity fails block by block. The air is thick with ash and brick dust. Every night, the glow of fires lights up the sky like a second sun. In the subways, thousands shelter from shellfire. The air is damp, reeking of oil, sweat, and fear. Rumors spread. Some say the Russians are flooding the tunnels, others whisper that the SS will blow them up to stop desertion. No one knows the truth. In the Vorbunker, Hitler receives reports that Steiner's attack never happened. He listens in silence. Then, in a cold, trembling voice, he declares the war lost. He will not leave Berlin. Everyone in the room understands what that means. Goebbels stands beside him, eyes hollow. "My Führer," he says softly, "the people of Berlin will fight with you until the end." Hitler nods, unmoving. Then we die together, April 25th. The Red Army storms through the eastern boroughs. Friedrichshain, Wedding, New Cologne. The city is being consumed from all sides. Soviet engineers throw pontoon bridges across canals under machine gun fire. Tanks roll across them into the center. At Treptow Park, Soviet troops raise red banners over the ruins of anti-aircraft positions. The graves of fallen comrades from 1941 and 1942 line the ground. Now the survivors fight among them. A soldier in the 150th Rifle Division writes in his diary, "Berlin is not a city anymore. It's a furnace made of stone and fire. Every wall shoots back at you." Weidling receives new orders directly from Hitler. Berlin will be held. Anyone who withdraws will be shot. SS officers begin executing deserters on sight. The Volkssturm fight with hopeless bravery. A few even manage to destroy Soviet tanks with Panzerfausts before being cut down by machine gun fire. In the western districts, remnants of Panzer Division Munchberg launch counterattacks with a handful of Panther tanks. They destroy several T-34s before being wiped out by overwhelming artillery. The German lines are shrinking by the hour. As night falls on the 25th, Soviet forces are within 3 kilometers of the Reichstag. Zhukov orders illumination shells fired over the city. The sky glows white as thousands of tracers cross the darkness. The thunder of artillery never stops, even at midnight. Berlin is dying, but it refuses to surrender. From the Tiergarten, one can see the flaming horizon in every direction: east, west, north, south. There is no escape, no relief, no mercy. The city of Hitler's empire has become his tomb. April 26, 1945, Central Berlin. Morning arrives over a city that has long since stopped resembling itself. Buildings are skeletal ruins. Smoke rises from every block. Roads are cratered, littered with rubble, twisted metal, and bodies. The smell of cordite and burning flesh hangs heavy in the air. Soviet troops push deeper into Berlin. They move in small tactical units, squads of infantry following tanks, engineers clearing mines, and snipers positioned in shattered windows. Every street is a battlefield. Every building hides an enemy. The defenders are a mix of desperation and improvisation. Wehrmacht veterans, some missing limbs, still clutching rifles. Hitlerjugend boys, barely 16, armed with MP40s and grenades. Volkssturm men, aged 60 and older, firing Panzerfausts from barricades. Civilians dragging the wounded into basements, some wielding knives or tools as weapons. At Alexanderplatz, Soviet infantry face one of the fiercest pockets of resistance. A lone building stands almost intact. Inside, a platoon of Volkssturm men fire from shattered windows. Soviet soldiers approach cautiously, tossing grenades and firing machine guns, advancing only meter by meter. Private Mikhail Sokolov from the 150th Rifle Division recalls later, "We lost half our men in one block. Every corner was alive with the enemy. Every floor held a machine gun. We couldn't see the living from the dead." Down the street, a T-34 tank is hit by a Panzerfaust. Flames erupt, consuming the vehicle. Its crew abandons it under fire. A German boy in the building across laughs briefly, a hollow, terrifying sound, before returning to firing. In the Reich Chancellery, Hitler spends hours walking between rooms, staring at maps with a magnifying glass. Generals plead for realistic assessments. Hitler refuses. Steiner is still on the way. Though he knows it is impossible, his mind is fraying. Goebbels notes the Führer is pale, exhausted, and speaking less. Meanwhile, Weidling struggles to maintain any semblance of order. Communications are sporadic. Orders sent to units across the city rarely reach their destination. Many units have disappeared entirely, leaving gaps in the defensive lines. In one basement near Potsdamer Platz, a group of children from the Hitlerjugend set up a makeshift machine gun nest. They fire at advancing Soviet soldiers until a grenade destroys their cover. Survivors crawl into nearby cellars, shaking. The Soviet advance continues relentlessly. Chukov's 8th Guards Army moves through Friedrichshain. 1st Guards Tank Army rolls through the Landwehr Canal, facing fierce house-to-house resistance. 3rd Shock Army prepares to assault the Reichstag from multiple directions. Soviet artillery pounds the city day and night. Incendiary shells ignite entire blocks, creating firestorms that force German defenders to flee or burn alive. Tanks crush barricades, while flamethrowers clear fortified cellars. Red Army engineers map out building by building, documenting each trap and obstacle. They know the battle will be slow, costly, and brutal. For the defenders, morale is fracturing. A Volkssturm lieutenant shouts at his men, "For the Führer! For Berlin!" Many obey out of fear, some out of fanaticism, most simply because retreat is impossible. Civilians witness the fighting, their eyes hollow. In basements, mothers hold babies as walls shake from artillery. Children cry from hunger, smoke, and terror. At night, sporadic firefights illuminate the streets with muzzle flashes. The sounds are continuous: machine guns, explosions, screams, and the collapse of buildings. Even the soil seems to scream. April 27, 1945. The Tiergarten becomes a killing ground. Soviet tanks advance along the shattered paths. German defenders attempt ambushes from trenches dug between toppled statues and mangled trees. Panzerfausts fire from ruined kiosks. MG-42s rattle endlessly from underground bunkers. A platoon of Hitlerjugend hides in the ruins of the Berlin Zoo. They fight with grim determination, firing at Soviet soldiers passing just 50 meters away. When grenades destroy their position, survivors flee into the tunnels, emerging elsewhere only to continue the fight. Civilian observers note the courage or madness of the German defenders, yet many also witness atrocities. SS units execute suspected deserters, the wounded are abandoned. Starvation begins to claim its share of victims, along with the bullets. On the Soviet side, commanders grow aware of the human cost. Marshal Zhukov issues strict instructions: advance but minimize unnecessary losses. Yet in the chaos of rubble and narrow streets, precision is impossible. Every house is a fortress. Every intersection a trap. Despite these losses, Soviet morale is high. Soldiers are fighting not just for victory, but to avenge the millions of compatriots killed during the German advance across the Eastern Front. As evening falls, the city is divided, eastern sectors under partial Soviet control. Central districts still in German hands. Western neighborhoods with civilians trapped, under constant bombardment. From the bunkers, Hitler and Goebbels watch reports of the advance. They speak in muted tones, aware that their empire is collapsing around them. Outside, Soviet patrols probe the streets. Fires flare across the horizon. The smell of blood and smoke is everywhere. Berlin is no longer a city, it is a tomb. And yet, within it, the German defenders continue to fight, house by house, street by street, block by block, refusing to die quietly. April 28, 1945, the heart of Berlin. From the north and east, Soviet artillery shells scream relentlessly, pounding the streets toward the Reichstag, the symbol and nerve center of Hitler's crumbling empire. Smoke from burning buildings curls into the sky, mixing with the early morning mist over the Spree. The city is a labyrinth of twisted metal, shattered stone, and smoldering rubble. Inside the Reichstag, German defenders prepare for what they know will be the final confrontation. Weidling consolidates scattered units, remnants of panzer divisions, SS battalions, and Volkssturm, into improvised squads. Orders are terse: hold the building at all costs. Many soldiers whisper among themselves, aware that all costs may mean death. Across the city, civilians hide in basements, churches, and bombed-out subway tunnels. Some peer through broken windows to see the advancing Red Army, their faces pale with fear. Children cry softly, clutching dolls dust-covered from weeks of sheltering underground. Outside, Soviet forces position for the assault. Marshal Zhukov observes the Reichstag through binoculars, noting the fortified approaches, the barricaded streets, and the positions of German heavy weapons. His plan is meticulous. Multiple infantry divisions will assault from different directions, supported by tanks and heavy artillery. Engineers will clear mines and rubble to allow armored support to advance. Lieutenant Sergei Ivanov, commanding a squad in the 150th Rifle Division, writes later, "The Reichstag was a fortress made of stone and steel. We could see machine gun barrels sticking from the windows. Each doorway was a trap. Each floor a death sentence. The Soviet artillery barrage begins just after dawn. Shells tear through walls, flattening sections of the building and igniting fires. The ground shakes with the repeated impact of heavy rounds. Smoke and dust fill the air, making it almost impossible to see more than a few meters ahead. Inside the Reichstag, German defenders respond. MG-42s rattle from the windows and doorways, firing at any movement in the streets. Panzerfaust teams crouch behind debris, waiting for tanks to approach. Every hallway, every staircase, every shattered office is turned into a killing ground. A young soldier, barely 17, shouts over the roar of battle, "Do not let them take the Reichstag." Not today, yet the reality is grim. Ammunition runs low. Communications are intermittent. Reinforcements are non-existent. The surrounding streets are littered with the dead and dying, making movement between positions nearly impossible. Soviet engineers begin clearing debris under heavy fire. Molotov cocktails, snipers, and panicked civilians caught between armies make every advance costly. The soldiers inch forward, crouching behind burnt-out vehicles and fractured walls. Tanks fire from a distance, but German anti-tank squads destroy several in the first hour of the attack. Sergeant Nikolai Petrov recalls decades later, "We lost half our men before even reaching the front steps. The building seemed endless. Every room had enemies. Every corridor hid death, but we could not stop. We had to push forward." By evening, Soviet forces managed to breach the outer barricades. Fires rage in the halls. Smoke chokes both defenders and attackers alike. The building becomes a maze of chaos where hand-to-hand combat erupts in the darkness of crumbling stairwells. Elsewhere in the city, desperate German units attempt last-ditch counterattacks. A battalion of Panzer Division Munchberg pushes north, trying to link with isolated pockets of defenders. Panzerfausts take out several T-34s, but Soviet artillery and concentrated infantry fire destroy the remaining armor. Many soldiers surrender, exhausted and demoralized, only to be executed by SS units enforcing Hitler's orders to fight to the death. In the streets surrounding the Reichstag, Soviet troops navigate burning rubble, the bodies of horses, soldiers, and civilians littering every corner. Each step forward is perilous. Mortar rounds explode without warning. Every turn reveals a new ambush. Inside the forebunker, Hitler receives updates from Weidling and other commanders. The news is grim. The Reichstag is under attack. Soviet forces are within blocks of the Chancellery, and most outer districts have fallen. Hitler, increasingly unhinged, orders the continued defense of Berlin. He refuses evacuation. He refuses surrender. The city, and all inside it, will be held, to the last man, the last bullet, the last breath. Goebbels, standing beside him, looks at the Führer and whispers, "It is the end, my Führer. We cannot hold them." Hitler does not respond. His eyes remain fixed on the map. Silence fills the room, broken only by the distant rumble of artillery and the muffled sounds of battle from above. As night descends, Soviet units consolidate their gains in the streets around the Reichstag. Fires illuminate shattered walls and twisted iron. The building, once a proud symbol of German power, is now a fortress of death, chaos, and despair. Civilians trapped nearby watch in horror as the battle continues. Smoke and flame paint the sky red. Every hour brings more destruction, more loss of life. Berlin has become a city of corpses, but inside, both defenders and attackers fight on, driven by duty, ideology, fear, or vengeance. The Reichstag beckons, the final prize, and neither side will yield. April 29, 1945. Berlin's inner districts. The city is a shattered shell. Buildings are gutted, streets are cratered, and the air is thick with smoke, dust, and the stench of death. Berlin is no longer a city, it is a battlefield, a maze of ruins where every street, every building, and every cellar is contested. Soviet infantry move cautiously. They advance in small squads, clearing one building at a time. Molotov cocktails flare against walls. Panzerfaust teams fire from shattered windows. Machine guns rattle incessantly. A single misstep can mean death, Private Vasily Ivanov of the 150th Rifle Division later wrote, "We entered each house like it was our last. Every corner, every floor, every room held enemies. The air was full of smoke and fear. It was hell, and we were living in it." Inside Berlin, German defenders cling to improvised positions. Wehrmacht veterans man machine guns from basement windows. Hitler Jugendboys, barely 16, fire MP-40s from attic floors. Volkssturm men, aged 60 and older, launch desperate Panzerfaust attacks. Civilians crouch in shadows, caught between the two armies, often killed simply for moving. A group of young defenders in a building near Potsdamer Platz fights until their ammunition is exhausted. Smoke fills the stairwell. The air is thick and choking. One boy, trembling, whispers, "We cannot leave. If we do, they will kill us." Soviet engineers and infantry push forward, using flamethrowers and grenades to clear fortified cellars. Tanks crush barricades and walls to allow passage. Every advance costs lives. Each street becomes a death trap. At Friedrichstrasse, a Soviet company enters a collapsed building. Inside, they find German soldiers lying in wait. Hand-to-hand combat erupts, rifles, bayonets, knives. The screams of the dying echo through the streets. Corporal Sergei Petrov later recounted, "We could not see who was alive or dead. We fought through the smoke, stepping over bodies, sometimes on top of them. There was no time to grieve, only to survive." In the Reich Chancellery, Hitler receives reports that the Soviets have penetrated central districts and are approaching the Tiergarten. He still refuses to leave. He walks the corridors of his bunker, consulting maps and giving orders to units that no longer exist. Goebbels and his aides try to keep a sense of normalcy, issuing propaganda orders and attempting to maintain civilian morale, but the city is collapsing around them. Meanwhile, Weidling orders units to reinforce key streets. Unter den Linden must hold. Friedrichstrasse is a last line of defense. The Tiergarten will delay Soviet armor as long as possible. Most units are scattered, barely coordinated, yet the German defenders continue to fight. Desperation fuels their resistance as they cling to ideology, fear, and duty. April 30th, early morning. The Soviet assault on the Reichstag begins in earnest. Soviet engineers lay down charges to breach entrances. Infantry follow, clearing each room with grenades and close-quarter combat. Inside the building, German defenders, a mixture of Panzer Division remnants, SS units, and Volkssturm, fight until they are cut down. Panzerfausts destroy a few Soviet tanks, but Soviet armor continues to roll forward, covering each infantry advance. The fighting is brutal, chaotic, and close quarters. Hand-to-hand combat is frequent. Smoke and fire fill every room. Civilians trapped inside basements are killed, sometimes by crossfire, sometimes intentionally. A young soldier, barely 19, writes in his diary, "I have never felt fear like this. We are everywhere and nowhere at once. The city screams, and we scream with it. Death is all around, yet we move forward." Outside, Soviet artillery continues to pound Berlin, leveling blocks to create paths for infantry and tanks. Smoke rises in massive columns. Flak towers are targeted relentlessly, yet many continue to fire sporadically, defending the city. In the Tiergarten, German units make one last stand. Panzerfausts hit Soviet tanks. Machine guns rattle from every broken wall. Yet the overwhelming force of the Red Army slowly grinds them down. In the Vorbunker, Hitler is informed that Soviet units are within hundreds of meters of the Chancellery. Reports of the Reichstag assault reach him. His demeanor is cold, resigned. He gives one final order: "We fight until the last bullet, the last man." Goebbels, aware of the inevitable, begins preparing for the destruction of his family and the continuation of their ideology until the very end. Berlin is now a city without mercy. Every street, every building, every block is a battlefield. And yet, both defenders and attackers fight on, each step forward, each moment of resistance, a testament to human endurance, desperation, and ideology. The final collapse is approaching. April 30th, 1945, the Vorbunker, Berlin. Berlin shudders under the thunder of Soviet artillery. Shells shake the streets above, rattling the windows of the bunker 28 feet below ground. The air is thick, damp, and fetid. It smells of human sweat, smoke, and fear. Every muffled explosion is a reminder: the city is falling and the Third Reich will not survive the day. Inside, Adolf Hitler moves slowly between rooms. His uniform is immaculate, yet his face is pale and drawn. Generals stand stiffly, clutching reports that no longer offer solutions. Officers speak in hushed tones, reluctant to break the oppressive silence. "The Russians are inside the Tiergarten," a messenger whispers. Hitler nods unmoving, staring at a map of the city. He does not speak. There is no hope in his eyes, only resolve or obsession. Joseph Goebbels, standing nearby, senses the end. He walks past Hitler, glancing at the walls, the maps, the records of a city doomed. Even he cannot deny the collapse. Yet he too is bound by ideology, by loyalty, by fear. Outside the city burns. Soviet troops press forward relentlessly. Zhukov's first Belarusian front is within blocks of the Reich Chancellery. Tanks crush barricades and rubble. Machine guns fire from every ruined building. Explosions rock streets once crowded with civilians now turn to corpses and fleeing survivors. Weidling, commanding the city's defense, realizes the Reich Chancellery cannot be held. He orders troops to continue fighting in the streets, to delay the Soviet advance as long as possible. Ammunition is almost gone. Food is exhausted. The defenders are shadows of soldiers, men, boys, and old men clinging to ideology and fear, armed with nothing more than rifles, Panzerfausts, and sheer will. Hitler makes his final decisions. He dictates a farewell political testament, instructing that Berlin's defense must continue, that the Führer must not surrender. He requests that his body be burned after death. By mid-afternoon, Hitler and Eva Braun retreat to their private quarters. Goebbels, Bormann, and a small inner circle are aware. The end is now. The distant roar of artillery and the closer rumble of tanks below are constant reminders. The city is overrun, and there is no escape. A shot rings out. It is a single precise sound echoing off the reinforced walls of the bunker. Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun have taken their lives. Inside the city streets, Soviet troops advance toward the Chancellery, encountering scattered but fanatical resistance. Volkssturm fighters attempt to ambush advancing soldiers from cellar windows. Hitlerjugend boys fire MP-40s from broken stairwells. SS units lay booby traps in corridors, collapsing walls onto Soviet tanks. The assault is methodical. Soviet engineers clear rubble, mark minefields, and signal infantry to advance through cleared paths. Tanks crush barricades. Flamethrowers sweep through basements. Corporal Nikolai Sokolov recalls, "Each building was a maze of death. We moved forward like shadows, knowing the enemy could be above, below, beside us. Every room had corpses, and yet we fought on." Goebbels, aware that the city will fall and Hitler is dead, prepares his own family for suicide. He ensures that each of his 6 children are given poison. Together with his wife Magda, they take their lives in the Chancellery garden. Staff members bury their bodies in a small pit. The last act of loyalty to a collapsing Reich. Meanwhile, Weidling, the city commander, continues issuing orders. He knows the war is lost. His men are exhausted, starving, and out of ammunition. He writes a surrender proposal to the Soviets. It is ignored for now. The streets are a chaotic war zone, but he refuses to abandon the city while there is a single German able to fight. In the Tiergarten and surrounding districts, Soviet forces fight house to house. Smoke obscures vision. Each intersection is a trap. Panzerfausts destroy tanks. Sniper fire claims infantry. Civilians cower in basements. Fires consume entire blocks. The Red Army steadily moves toward the Reich Chancellery. Every step is contested. Every advance costs lives. By nightfall, Berlin is a city without order. Corpses line streets, burned-out vehicles mark intersections, and the smoke from thousands of fires fills the sky. Yet within this inferno, both Soviet troops and German defenders continue to fight, one side advancing inexorably, the other refusing to die quietly. Berlin is teetering on the brink of total collapse. May 1, 1945, Central Berlin. The morning light reveals a city almost unrecognizable. Berlin is a wasteland of rubble and fire, with smoke rising from every street and building. The roar of Soviet artillery shakes the ground constantly, punctuated by the crackle of small arms and the guttural thumps of collapsing walls. The Reichstag, Berlin's proud symbol of German power, is now a shattered fortress. Its windows are broken, its walls scarred with bullet holes, and every floor is littered with debris and corpses. The few remaining defenders, SS troops, Panzer remnants, and Volkssturm fighters, cling to the building as if it were a lifeline. Soviet forces prepare the final assault. Zhukov's 8th Guards Army surrounds the building on all sides. Tanks fire at any resistance from the exterior. Engineers place explosive charges to breach entrances and create pathways for infantry. Assault squads equipped with flamethrowers, grenades, and rifles ready themselves for the bloody close-quarters fight. Sergeant Vasily Petrov, part of an assault team, recalls decades later, "We knew the Reichstag was a fortress, but we also knew that it had to fall today. Every step was fire, smoke, and death. There was no turning back. the assault begins. Soviet troops storm the first floors, grenades and gunfire ripping through corridors. German defenders fight fiercely, destroying tanks with Panzerfausts, shooting from windows and barricading stairwells. The air is filled with smoke, dust, and the cries of the dying. Inside the Reichstag, defenders know the building cannot hold. A young SS officer shouts orders, rallying his men for one last defense. Hitler's voice is absent, replaced by the distant thrum of Soviet tanks and artillery. The city is lost. The Reichstag is all that remains of the Reich's prestige. "Do not let them take the Reichstag," he screams. Many of the fighters are teenagers and old men, armed with little more than rifles and desperation. They throw grenades from shattered windows, fire from stairwells, and attempt to delay the inevitable. The fighting is brutal and chaotic. Soviet soldiers move floor by floor, room by room. Each level presents new resistance. Fires rage through the building, adding smoke and heat to an already lethal environment. Hand-to-hand combat erupts in hallways. Many German defenders are killed or captured, but some continue to fight until the very last bullet. Red Army engineers clear collapsed stairwells, detonate trapped rooms, and guide advancing squads into the heart of the building. Tanks fire into windows to provide cover. Soviet snipers position themselves to suppress any last resistance. By afternoon, Soviet troops reach the roof. A group of soldiers raises a red banner over the Reichstag. The sight is both symbolic and practical, a sign of conquest, a signal to remaining defenders that the city is lost. The battle inside the building continues for hours. Isolated pockets of German resistance fight on in basements and debris-filled halls. Panzerfausts destroy a few Soviet tanks and rifle fire claims more lives, but the momentum cannot be stopped. Elsewhere in Berlin, remaining defenders are in disarray. Streets are impassable, littered with corpses and rubble. Soviet patrols sweep through neighborhoods, clearing resistance and securing positions. Civilians emerge cautiously, aware the city is now under enemy control. Hunger, fear, and exhaustion have left many too weak to resist. Weidling, the city commander, understands the Reichstag's fall signifies the collapse of Berlin's organized defense. He drafts surrender terms to the Soviet command, seeking to prevent further unnecessary bloodshed. The Red Army takes the Reichstag completely by evening. Smoke and flame mark the building, but the Soviet flag flies atop the ruins. For the first time in nearly 4 years, German power in Berlin has been decisively broken. The defenders are either dead, captured, or fleeing in desperation. Private Nikolai Sokolov recalls, "When the flag went up, we knew the city was ours. But the streets were still full of death. The fight was not over yet. We had won the Reichstag, but the city itself was still a battlefield. Berlin is no longer a city. It is a tomb for tens of thousands." The last organized pockets of German resistance continue to hold out in isolated blocks, but the fate of the Third Reich is sealed. The final chapter is approaching. May 2, 1945, the end of Berlin's resistance. Berlin is a city of ruin. Smoke rises from every district. Fires burn unchecked. The streets are strewn with the bodies of soldiers and civilians alike. The few remaining German defenders are scattered, exhausted, and starving. Soviet troops move methodically through the wreckage, clearing block by block. Every building is approached with caution. Booby traps, hidden Panzerfaust teams, and snipers make the streets deadly. Engineers lead the way, detonating mines and clearing rubble for infantry to follow. Tanks crush barricades and ruined vehicles, providing support for advancing soldiers. Volkssturm fighters and Hitlerjugend continue to resist, often in basements or cellars. Panzerfausts destroy tanks, rifle fire cuts down infantry, and grenades rip through barricades. But their numbers are tiny compared to the overwhelming force of the Red Army. A young defender, 17 years old, fights until exhaustion takes him. He writes in a diary found later, "We fight because we must. Every step back is shame. Every bullet counts, but soon there is nothing left to fight for." Weidling, recognizing the futility, officially surrenders the city to the Soviets. He contacts Marshal Zhukov, sending a message requesting terms. The fighting is ordered to cease wherever possible. Across the city, isolated pockets of resistance still flare. In Charlottenburg, a few SS units make a last stand in the ruins of a government building. In Kreuzberg, Volkssturm men fire from rooftops until Soviet soldiers force them to retreat. In Mitte, Hitlerjugend ambush advancing squads before being overwhelmed. Civilians, long trapped in basements, emerge cautiously, their eyes wide with shock. Many are injured or starving. The streets are no longer safe, but the fighting is winding down. Soviet forces consolidate control. The Reichstag and surrounding districts are secured. Soldiers moved methodically through the streets, collecting prisoners, assisting civilians, and extinguishing fires when possible. The city is silent in many areas, the sound of battle replaced by smoke hissing, rubble shifting, and the occasional gunshot. Private Mikhail Sokolov recalls decades later. By the afternoon, Berlin had fallen completely. The streets were full of death and the city itself seemed to mourn. Yet we had won, at a terrible cost. The aftermath is immediate and brutal. Tens of thousands of German soldiers are captured or killed. Civilians face food shortages, disease, and the devastation of their homes. The city lies in ruins, a testament to months of bombardment and street-to-street combat. Weidling and his remaining officers are taken prisoner. Hitler, Eva Braun, and Goebbels are dead. The Third Reich has collapsed entirely in its capital. May 3, 1945, Red Army reports. Berlin is fully under Soviet control. Organized German resistance has ended. The survivors, both soldiers and civilians, begin to reckon with the total destruction around them. The Battle of Berlin has ended, but the city will carry the scars forever. Millions are dead, countless others displaced, and a proud, powerful city lies in smoking ruins. The Third Reich's final stand has concluded. Berlin has fallen not quietly, but in the fury, desperation, and tragedy that marked its last days. May 1945, Berlin, a city in ruins. The guns have fallen silent. The relentless roar of artillery, the crackle of machine guns, and the screams of the wounded are gone. Yet the city is not peaceful. Berlin lies in ruin, a fractured mosaic of fire-blackened walls, collapsed roofs, and streets littered with rubble and corpses. Smoke still curls from smoldering buildings, and the acrid smell of cordite, charred wood, and human flesh lingers in the air. For the survivors, life is a tenuous grasp on reality. Thousands of civilians emerge from basements and subway tunnels, many starving, injured, or in shock. Children wander among the ruins, clutching the hands of mothers who have lost husbands, brothers, or fathers in the last desperate days. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and sanitation has collapsed. Disease threatens to follow the devastation. The German military remnants are rounded up. Weidling and the surviving officers are taken prisoner by the Soviets, their authority dissolved along with the city. Tens of thousands of Wehrmacht soldiers, Volkssturm members, and Hitlerjugend fighters surrender. Many are sent to POW camps. Some die in transit from exhaustion, starvation, or untreated wounds. The fanatical resistance that had prolonged the battle is extinguished. Across the city, Soviet soldiers begin documenting the devastation. Officers mark destroyed streets and buildings, noting strong points, barricades, and the fierce resistance encountered. Diaries, letters, and photographs record a city that became a battlefield for weeks. A symbol of both human courage and fanaticism. Historians later reflect on the battle. Berlin's defense was heroic in its sheer persistence, yet tragic in its futility. Civilians were caught in the crossfire of ideology and war. Boys and old men were compelled to fight against overwhelming odds. The city's destruction accelerated the end of the European war, but at immense human cost. Casualties: tens of thousands of German soldiers killed or captured. Approximately 125,000 civilians killed in the final weeks. Destruction: the majority of central Berlin buildings were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Key landmarks, including the Reichstag, Reichschancellery, and Brandenburg Gate, were reduced to rubble. Soviet losses: significant, with estimates of 80,000 to 100,000 soldiers killed or wounded in the final assault. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. For the Red Army, Berlin's fall was vengeance, triumph, and horror intertwined. For Germans, the city's destruction symbolized the final collapse of their world. Memories of the last defenders vary. Volkssturm members, Hitlerjugend boys, and Wehrmacht veterans later recount streets turned into slaughterhouses, basements filled with fear, and the desperate orders from a leadership that no longer could influence reality. Many describe bravery intertwined with terror, acts of self-sacrifice, and the futility of continued resistance. Soviet soldiers remember the courage of some German fighters, the devastation of the city, and the haunting silence that followed the final firefights. Both sides recorded what they saw: a city destroyed, human lives extinguished, and the ruins of a regime that had refused to die quietly. Berlin's legacy is complicated. It became a symbol of total war, fanaticism, and human endurance. The battle is remembered not only as the fall of a city but as the collapse of the Third Reich. Memorials and records preserve the memory of the soldiers and civilians who fought, resisted, and suffered in the last days. Today, the scars of battle are gone in the physical sense, but history preserves them in memory, photographs, and archives. The streets, Once corridors of death, now carry the stories of courage, terror, and the ultimate cost of war. Berlin fell not just to the Soviet army but to the inexorable march of history. It was a city that refused to surrender quietly, and in doing so, became a testament to human endurance and the tragic consequences of ideological fanaticism. The defense of Berlin, April-May 1945, marks the end of the Third Reich. A city, a people, and an empire engulfed in fire and ruin, leaving behind lessons in courage, desperation, and the heavy price of total war.